Okay, what are some specific spiritual practices that you can use to have better digestion, improve your mood, and have more energy? Hello and welcome. This is Functional Faith Friday, and I am Crystal. I'm a holistic spirituality practitioner. I talk about things that can make spirituality more practical and help you experience the divine all the time through every part of life, even through dysfunction and doubt. So today we're talking about food. We're talking about the mind, body, spirit, your gut, your brain, and your spirit. And where do those things intersect? And what are specific things you can do to strengthen those different areas of who you are? So specific spiritual practices. Now, if this seems kind of random, we started talking about this on Wednesday. We also talked about it on Thursday. We're talking even more about it today because we believe in functional faith. That's my Facebook group with my husband, where we wrestle with these things with our faith and how the implications that our spirituality has on every part of our life. We believe that we have the foundation of our faith, and that is Christ, and we are shaped more into the image of Christ by the Spirit working in our life when we submit to the spiritual disciplines. There are specifically 12 spiritual disciplines that we share and teach and model in our functional faith program, but there are many spiritual disciplines, and personally I think that basically everything can be a spiritual discipline, depending on whether or not you are practicing mindfulness. And that's the first practice that I want to talk about today, as we're talking about the mind, body, spirit, and the practices with food. We're going to talk about mindfulness first, because as we talked about on Wednesday, you're not what you eat, you are what your body can do with what you eat. Similarly, because food is the carrier of nutrition, should be the carrier of nutrition, but some of our bodies are compromised, and that so our body isn't always able to absorb that nutrition. Similarly, I'm drawing a line from that to point to the spiritual reality that is similar. When we practice the spiritual disciplines, they should be the carrier of God's grace and blessing, and like I said, shaping us into the image of Christ. But if we're not mindful when we're practicing spiritual disciplines, no matter what spiritual discipline we're practicing, they're useless to us. If we're practicing spiritual disciplines for selfish gain or for pride, to be able to say, I read my Bible every day, or to be able to say, I prayed for you, or whatever it might be, or even for, I think a lot of my life I was practicing spiritual disciplines not to experience more of God, not to have a deeper experience of God's love, or to be able to love others with God's love. But I was practicing spiritual disciplines. It felt like for a good reason, but it's to get over my anxiety and to get over my depression. And that was really the driving force in my pursuit of God. So we have to be mindful of what we're doing and why we're doing it, both when we're practicing spiritual disciplines and when we're trying to get healthier physically or mentally. We have to be intentional about our intentions. But mindfulness is kind of like a umbrella spiritual discipline, or like an umbrella practice that has to permeate every different thing, every other practice that we're going to talk about, every other spiritual discipline, or every other discipline in any other arena of our life. So mindfulness is key. Mindfulness involves being present in this moment, shutting out distractions, and not even shutting out distractions, it's being very present, even with the distractions. Whatever is happening, you're experiencing that. You're not thinking about the future and all the things you have to get done. You're not thinking about the past and all the things you should have done, how you could have done them better. I'm talking to myself right now. Mindfulness is being present to what you're sensing right now, what you're experiencing in this moment. So there's actually, just to get a little bit technical with it, there's these villi that are part of the mucosal membrane of our small intestine. Think a shag carpet. So there's these little villi that are lining our small intestine, and they're sensitive. So they're sensitive to just anything that can, to toxins, to even to some foods that we eat. Dairy, gluten, sugar, these things can be damaging to those villi, and they're there to like it when they're damaged, they're supposed to be like a really plush shag carpet, right? But when they're damaged, they get like kind of like smoothed out and like laid down, and they don't, whichever like little villi gets like damaged, well, that's like now the nutrient that we're not able to absorb as well. Okay, and so when that happens, we're not able to actually take in the nutrients from our food. And there are things that can protect those villi, and there's things that can harm those villi. But when we're being mindful of how we eat, we're doing things that are going to help protect that, so that if we're eating the perfect diet and not getting the nutrients from it, that's not what we want. But we are eating the food, and whatever we're taking in, we're receiving the good gifts that are in that. So let's go into the next discipline that we can practice to strengthen our mind, body, and spirit with food is prayer. And that's probably an easy one that we think of first, right? You got food, you're going to bless your food. But remember, we're talking about applying mindfulness to all of this. So a lot of us just say a quick, we just throw up a prayer real quick, and just like that, I can leave my eye, we're good. We're gonna keep rolling. But we just throw up a prayer really quick because it's habit, right? But we don't actually take the time to pause and reflect about where the food came from. We don't, when blessings are spoken in the Bible, it's not just like a rotary thing necessarily, like when a father blesses their child, right? It might be something that they're doing on their deathbed. It's something that it's power in it. So when we're blessing our food, we're showing gratitude, and we're also like to God, yes, and also to like everything that we might even say like bless the hands that prepared the food, but we don't think about all the hands that have gotten the food to where we are. We don't necessarily think about the farmer. We don't think about the animal and the life that it led, or the plant and all the elements that came into play to get that plant to grow and to get that plant shipped to us. The money that was exchanged, the thought that was put into it. We don't think about how much energy and how many different people, work to get the food to where we are. Like all of that can be a part of that prayer, right? So I think it's really a time to just pause and reflect and pray and bless all the hands that prepared our food, and bless God for giving us for providing us with the food. And like scientifically, that actually does change how we digest our food. When we take that time, it actually makes a difference in how our food digests. So what we're going to be this is going to be a theme throughout all the other practices that we talk about, and there might be some that surprise you here that you haven't thought about. But like we're trying to move from the sympathetic nervous system into the parasympathetic nervous system. That's something I think we need to cover before we get any deeper, because most of us live in this state of constant stress and anxiety. Even if you don't feel like you're an anxiety-prone person, or if you don't feel like you have, or if you've not been diagnosed with clinical anxiety or generalized anxiety, we live in this fight or flight because, the world is kind of designed that way right now, at least in our Western culture, and also 2020. I mean, need I say much more? We've had a lot of stress. There's a lot of, and stress isn't just stuff that makes you feel stressed out, like makes you feel tense. But stress is anything that is coming against our body, that's like the air that we breathe is stressful for our body. The biggest stressor on our body throughout the day is actually eating and the process of digestion. But the air we breathe, the water that we drink, any toxins, whether that's toxic and it's a toxic environment or a toxic relationship or a toxic thought pattern, these are stresses on the body. And we need to move from the sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight, because our body isn't thinking about digesting our food and absorbing the nutrients. It's not thinking about all that stuff when we're trying to run from a bear, right? That's where the fight or flight comes from. It shuts down digestion. And most of us live there all the time. So we need to move from there to the parasympathetic nervous system. And prayer is one way to do that. And that's just scientifically proven that prayer and meditation help us get into that parasympathetic nervous system. Rest and digest is another name for it. And it just, our body is calmed, and it can now better absorb the food, the nutrients from the food that we're eating. So prayer is the first one. And I do want to make sure I'm not skipping over anything in my notes. So in prayer, you can sing your prayer. We talked about on Wednesday, the vagus nerve being the largest nerve in our body. It's the wandering, that's what vagus means, nerve. It touches basically every major organ, and the vagus nerve connects the brain to the second brain, that being our gut. Most of our serotonin is stored in our gut. A lot of our brain functions actually are hugely impacted by what's going on in our gut and what we're eating. And so, yeah, the vagus nerve is stimulated when we sing. It's also stimulated when we do anything that shows compassion or kindness or connection or this altruistic. So if we incorporate singing into our prayer, like my family, we sing God is so good, that will further engage that vagus nerve and help you to get into that parasympathetic nervous system and absorb your food better. And I think it goes without saying, but like when you absorb your nutrients from your food, because your food has to, when the food gets into the bloodstream, it can't just still be in that solid state. It has to break down into smaller particles for your body to recognize. If it gets into your bloodstream in a larger state, like as a protein instead of as an amino acid, then your body will attack it like it's an invader, like it's foreign, and that's how we get allergies and autoimmune disease and all these different breakdowns in our system. So make sure I'm not skipping anything. And so prayer doesn't, and I mentioned this the other day, prayer doesn't have to be a religious act. Let me say it like this. When you're blessing your food, it doesn't have to be a religious act. You can simply show gratitude for the food in front of you. Like I said, to everything that brought the food to being in front of you, to being on your plate. And you can take the time to be mindful by tapping into all your senses, smelling your food. And this is one good reason why it's another good reason to cook food at home, to cook your meals at home, because there's that time. It's an experience of cutting and mashing and blending and stirring. All these things are preparing your body, preparing your mind to receive that food. But taking the time to show gratitude and smell the food and bless it doesn't have to be a religious. Of course, for me, it's religious, but we are all spiritual creatures, so it can still be, it can still serve your body, mind and spirit, to bless your food, whatever you believe. So the next one that we're going to talk about might be another one that you thought of already, and it's not that. We're messing up here. We're all over the place. Okay, it's celebration. teaser on the other ones. It's celebration. And you probably already thought of it because it's the holiday season. And but you might not have thought of it as a spiritual discipline. And celebration is certainly a spiritual practice, a spiritual exercise, when done mindfully. When we are being grateful for the people that we're surrounded with, for the opportunity to be with them, even if we're being with them virtually, even if it's only online, we have people in our lives that we care about and who care about us. And if we show gratitude to our higher power, to God, for that, then that can become a spiritual exercise. It can be enriching to the soul. So celebration oftentimes, pretty much all the time, involves using food. And we even see that in the Bible. They had festivals, and like it was a part of their religion to have festivals, and those festivals involved a lot of food. And even we don't take communion in the Christian church. We don't take communion anymore with a meal most of the time, but that's what they did in the New Testament. There was always a meal with communion. Breaking bread together wasn't just talking about like a little tiny wafer or something like that, or something like peeling back a tiny plastic cup. They it was a part of a meal, and they had a glass of wine and they had bread, and that's how they took communion. So food is very much a part of it's very much a part of like these spiritual practices that we see in the Bible, and usually in the form of celebration of a festival or a holiday. And so today it's more like holidays is when we use celebration and church potlucks and whatnot. But if we go into those things just full of gratitude and not full of, what's the word for it? Like having to do a lot, like obligation, not full of obligation. Like, I don't even know why I put my name down to bring this cornbread to this potluck. I gotta make this with all my kids. If we go into it with an attitude of gratitude, then the celebration with the food, it can be a spiritual gift, and it's like I said, with the vagus nerve, it's stimulated by these feelings of unity and compassion and things like that, and will actually help us to get that rest and digest and better absorb our food and give us more energy and better health. So the next one, kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum, is silence and solitude. So first talk about celebration and community with other people, even virtually, but now silence and solitude. Sometimes I'm gonna say it's good for us to eat alone. Now, if you're a mom like me, you're like, yes, amen, sister. But how, right? But I think sometimes it's good to be able to, especially if you are a mom with young kids, or if you're a really busy business executive and you're used to like scarfing. I know I watch shows where they're like scarfing down food like in the office, like with papers everywhere. That does not give way to good digestion. We actually, and if you are that busy executive, and like, why don't moms eat like alone? Because we can't. The children always want to eat off our plate. They don't want to eat off their plate. They want to eat off our plate. Doesn't matter if it's the same thing. They want to eat off our plate. And so, but eating in silence and solitude can both be a spiritual discipline and help with our digestion, because chewing is actually really, because first off, we already mentioned mindfulness, right? It's much easier to be mindful of what you're experiencing, of your food, of the smell, of the taste, of maybe like if you really are one of those people who like hate hearing someone else chew and swallow, then you appreciate this as well. But like you can be more mindful and just enjoy the experience of eating if you're alone, right? And chewing is really, really important. It's the first way that we're breaking down our food. And remember, we said that it's extremely important. Like when we break down, you really want to turn your solids into liquids, and you even want to chew your liquids, like because you want to give your body as much time as possible to digest to break down your food, right? And the smaller you break it down in your mouth, the longer it spends in your mouth, because there's like amylase, there's different like carbohydrates begin breaking down in the mouth actually. So proteins begin in the stomach, but carbohydrates begin in the mouth. So the longer you take to chew, the easier you're making it for the body. Because remember, we said that the biggest stressor on our body throughout the day is digestion. So when you're eating in silence and solitude, you have more time, I feel like, and you can be more mindful of these things. You're not self-conscious about how someone else is, why she taking so long to eat her food, or like, or self-conscious about how loud you chew, because that's me. I chew really loud. I have had friends complain about it. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm so self-conscious. You have no idea. I'm really trying. But eating in silence and eating in solitude, also it heightens your senses, I think, because think about it. When we close our eyes and we chew, I close my eyes when I eat ice cream. I know I can taste it so much better. If it's really good, if I'm eating really good food, I close my eyes and you can taste it more. So when you're in silence and when you're in solitude, I just feel like you have more of an experience of your food. And it's easier to take that time to show gratitude and all that. So try it out and let me know. Eating in silence and solitude. Okay, it's going to help you digest and absorb your food that much better, and it might be a spiritual experience for you. Next one is affirmations. Okay, this can be a spiritual practice that you do while you're eating. let me make sure I'm not straying too far from my notes. Oh yeah, and the last one, silence and solitude. That's also without TV or your cell phone. Silence doesn't mean just you not talking. It means you're in silence. It's silent, okay? So don't, like, a lot of us are very, very guilty of always eating in front of the TV. I know Kingston really, really loves, he used to wait to eat until we got the TV going and stop eating if we had to, anyway. We are all guilty of it, okay? We love to eat, enjoy a meal while we watch TV. I mean, theaters started to serve us food while we're watching a movie because they knew how we were, okay? So eat in silence and solitude, no TV, no screens. Okay, but affirmations, okay? Many of us suffer from a negative body image. It's not exclusive to women, right? So and all these negative thoughts and feelings and this stressful relationship that we have with food, you better believe that all that is impacting our digestion, okay? So if we're eating, and even so like I've mentioned before that I'm a bit of a perfectionist. So it took me a while to stop doing this. I think I still do it sometimes. If I'm eating something or serving something to my kids that wasn't what I thought was like the highest quality, then I would feel guilty. I'd feel shame, like, oh my gosh, like we're probably gonna get sick now. That was so extra. I had to let that go because I mean, of course, try to get the highest quality food. Okay, but we ain't all got it like that, okay? So we can't always be eating the organic, local, grass-fed, sustainably raised every meal, every day, every time with 5 people in the family. It just doesn't happen. Not for us, not in this season, okay? And there's no shame in that. And when you put shame in that, then it's actually doing the opposite. Like it's you're working against yourself because you're wanting those healthier foods because you think they'll make you healthier. But like I said, you can be eating the perfect diet and not be absorbing the nutrients from that diet because you're knocking yourself out in the back end because you're having all these negative feelings, all these stressful feelings, and that puts you into what? Fight or flight instead of rest or digest, into sympathetic instead of parasympathetic, right? And so what would be better and much more beneficial is for us to speak these affirmations to ourselves, have a better relationship with food. Okay, so here are some affirmations that you can speak to while you're eating. This is nourishing to my body. I love this food. My body thanks me for this food. What else? I meant to write them down, but I'm just gonna go with it. This food is a blessing to me and my family. I will absorb every nutrient in this food. This plate is beautiful. I love myself for choosing these foods. I might make no, I shouldn't say that. I was gonna say I might make a list and type them in the comments of things that I can just being intentional and doing this as a practice regularly and putting emotion behind it. Don't just say it and not believe it. Like truly mean it. I bless myself from each choice on this plate. This food is going to bring me joy. This food is healing to my cells, right? Like you can go on and on and on with this. Speaking affirmations while you're eating, especially if you have a history with eating disorder, okay? This can become a spiritual practice for you. If you either have a problem with eating too much or too little, you can shape affirmations around that. We have to fix the tapes that play in our head because they affect us mind, body, and spirit, okay? And this is how you can begin. This is one way you can begin to do that. So if you have a problem with under eating, I eat until I am satisfied. I eat. This food is I don't know. I will eat until my body is nourished. If you have a problem with overeating, you can use those same ones. I stop eating when I am satisfied, right? Okay. The next one is confessions. it was actually supposed to be confession. I didn't mean to put the S there. I think I was thinking about, these are my confessions. I got a little Usher in my head apparently, but confession. Okay, what does that have to do with food? How do you deal with food? Well, when you get stuff off your shoulders, it can untie some knots in your stomach. Right? We use so much language. It's like we intuitively know, right? Butterflies in our stomach, knots in our stomach, that there is this mind body connection, right? That there's gut brain connection. When we have something weighing on our minds that we done did, okay? Maybe you just got into an argument with your husband or wife, or maybe you and your mom got into it, or maybe it's something from a long time ago. If there's something that is just eating away at you, right? Confessing that can relieve that burden, untie the knot in your stomach, and you can experience some symptoms are psychosomatic. Some symptoms, man, they have an emotional root. And when we confess our sins, when we confess the mistakes that we've made to our brother or sister, to someone else, sometimes we confess stuff to God, but we feel like it bounced off the ceiling, and it brings healing. When we hear another person say, "You're forgiven from that," like that's not you. You're done. Like that. Okay, that was you, but you're forgiven. That can bring healing, and that can affect our digestion and our absorption of nutrients. Okay, so that's something that can be healing to another spiritual practice that can be healing. So the next one is forgiveness. Maybe you've heard before that forgiveness isn't just for the other person. Forgiveness is for you. There's and it's the same thing with like the confession. It's just the other side of the coin, right? When we're harboring this pain or this resentment or this anger, it finds a place in us. It lives inside of us. It has an actual tangibility, and it impacts us. And so when we choose to forgive, it actually is healing to us physically. When it comes to food, I think our food can even remind us. We can take it as an opportunity with the confession and with the forgiveness, whichever side of the coin we need to work on at that given moment. We can take different aspects from our food. Remember, Christ is overall and all and through all. So I think we can worship God and we can practice spiritual disciplines through material things. We can use them as reminders, right? We can use physical things, material things as reminders of transcendent truths, of spiritual truths. So we can be tasting our food, and we can taste a bitter food, and it can remind us. And this is the Jewish religion does this, right? At Passover, or is it Hanukkah? Somebody correct me if you know, where they have the bitter herbs that's Passover. They have the bitter herbs that remind them of the tears that was shed when they were in slavery and stuff like that. So bitter foods can remind us, can be a cue to us to think, am I harboring any bitterness, and who towards? Sweet foods can remind us to think, who has been, has that person been sweet to me? Even if they did something that embittered me at one point, did they ever do anything? Is there any sweetness that I can see in them? Or how can I be sweet towards them? Now, obviously, there's healthy boundaries. There are some people who are toxic, and we can forgive them without letting them back into our lives, right? But this is, for those situations that can be reconciled in a safe and healthy way. What about, sour foods? Can remind us, how am I being sour towards them, right? Where, am I, when they speak to me, am I still mad about this? And so I'm like, that's my sour face. Do I look like I just sucked on a lemon every time they walk into the room? Okay. And then savory. What can I savor about who they are? What can I savor about our relationship that maybe will help me to re-engage, maybe help me to confess this to them because I know I was wrong for acting bitter, for acting sour towards them. So even in our food, it can be a reminder of who we are, who God is, who we can be to other people through the power of the Spirit. And then the last spiritual discipline we've been going for a little bit tonight, but that's all right. The last spiritual discipline is guidance. I've heard, and maybe a lot of you guys have heard as well, the illustration of a tapestry, right? There's this tapestry that's being woven in the sky, and on our end, it looks like all jumbled, like it just looked a crazy mess, but then on God's end, it's beautifully woven together. And I think I'm using that illustration to point to, our relationship with food, in that mind, body, spirit connection. It's hard to see all the different ways that not only what kind of food that we're eating, but how we're eating it, how we're taking in it. Are we chewing our food all the way? Are we eating while we're watching TV? Are we eating all the right foods and in the right way, but we're holding on to this resentment, or there's something that needs to be healed on the emotional or spiritual level? It's hard to see that by ourselves because we see this side of it. Or it's like we're in like the middle of like a maze, like in a cornfield or something like that, and like we can't see the way out. We need somebody who's on the outside of this situation. We need somebody who's on the out, who has a different perspective, who's not in the mud with us, right? And that's where guidance comes into play. And guidance is a spiritual discipline that's been practiced forever. Having a spiritual director is especially seen in like the Catholic religion, but a lot of Protestants are seeing the usefulness and the blessing of having a spiritual guide, someone who can just hear your story and work with you one-on-one, but also having a guide when it comes to your relationship with food, right? Mind, body, and spirit. Somebody who can connect all those different aspects of who you are. That's when holistic spirituality practitioner comes into play, or coach comes into play, right? And so I'm going to talk a little bit more about this guidance piece of it on Sunday, on Self-Care Sunday, because it's an act of self-care, seeking out guidance, seeking someone who can connect these different pieces of the puzzle, who can have an aerial view of you and help you find your perfect path to experiencing more divinity in your life, experiencing more health, and more of a holistic spirituality. So again, we're going to get into that more on Sunday. If this is part 2 to our gut, brain, spirit videos, and we also talked about food and spirituality yesterday with integrative health coach Nakia Morgan. So if you missed everything else we did this week, check that out. You can find it in the Functional Faith group, and it will be on my page for a bit longer. So thank you for joining. If you watched the end, let me know in the comments what spiritual practice was surprising to you that you can practice surrounding your food. All right. Thank you so much again, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend.